Welcome to the debate. What if I told you that the entire foundation of the modern global economy uh, wasn't actually built by some conquering general or a brilliant king or, a visionary CEO? What if instead the whole framework of global capitalism basically rests on the shoulders of a 15th century friar with a math book?
I would say that is an incredibly romanticized view of history.
Is it though?
Yeah, it really is, because that friar, he didn't just invent something out of thin air. He simply wrote down the practical, everyday solutions that merchants had already been forced to develop just to survive in a really complex world.
Well, and that exact tension is what we are exploring today. We are diving into the history and the actual mechanics of double-entry bookkeeping.
Right.
And our discussion today stems from a really brilliant, highly popular video simply titled Double Entries. And I really want to emphasize this right up front. The amazing conceptual ideas and the visual design for this video were personally created by the YouTube channel Hot Holt.
Yes, the design by Hot Holt Holt is just incredibly high quality. It's visually stunning, and it makes complex ideas so easy to grasp.
Exactly. It's actually gained massive traction globally, and it's currently being watched very closely by audiences all across America right now. People are really taking notice of the ideas from Hot Holt Holt. So we're following that video's journey today, looking at how one specific method of, just recording numbers, managed to map out the future of global trade.
Right, but to ensure we are completely grounded before we start arguing, let's explain exactly what double-entry bookkeeping actually is. So, for a middle schooler listening, let's keep it really simple.
Sure.
It is an accounting system where every single financial transaction is recorded twice, once as a debit and once as a credit.
Two entries. Hence, double entry.
Exactly. So let's say you borrow $100 from a friend. In a double-entry system, you record the $100 of cash you just received in one column. But at the exact same time, you simultaneously record the $100 of debt that you now owe in another column.
Right, and it operates on this strict mathematical equation. Assets always equal liabilities plus equity, which simply put means what you own has to equal what you owe plus what actually belongs to you.
Yep.
It creates an automatic, undeniable symmetry. If the left side of your book doesn't perfectly match the right side, you know instantly that a mistake has been made or, someone is stealing from you.
Right. And the central question raised by the material from Hot Hoot is a matter of cause and effect. Did this mathematical tool actively create modern capitalism, allowing large global businesses to even exist? Or did the shifting legal frameworks and the practical needs of rapidly growing businesses force people to adopt this math out of pure necessity?
Well, my position is that the mathematical system itself, particularly when it was mass distributed, was the true catalyst. It was the driver. Before double entry, merchants used single entry bookkeeping.
Which is pretty basic.
Yeah, it's essentially just a diary, just a list of what you bought and sold. And that is incredibly fragile. Double entry provided a mathematical mirror of reality. That precise built-in certainty gave human beings the confidence to trust each other across vast distances and to take massive financial risks. Without the tool itself, the modern commercial economy simply never happens.
I come at it from a different way. I look at that exact same history, but I draw the exact opposite conclusion.
Okay, let's hear it.
I agree the math is structurally important, obviously, but I believe that legal systems and societal business needs are what truly pulled that math into prominence. The original mathematical concepts actually existed among Islamic and Jewish merchants centuries before Europe widely adopted them.
Right, it has the basics early on.
They did. So if the math alone possessed this magical power to create global business, commercial capitalism would have exploded in the Middle East long before it reached Italy. Instead, it was the specific legal structures in Europe that caused this accounting system to become a global necessity.
Well, let's test that premise by looking at the sheer mechanical power of the math first. Because we have to understand why Arabic numerals, the numbers 0 through 9, and the principles of algebra were so revolutionary when they began transferring to Europe between the 10th and 13th centuries.
It was a huge culture shock for Europe.
It was. The European Church actually pushed back against this hard. They banned Arabic numerals. They often refer to 0 as the devil's number.
Right, because it represented a void or nothingness, which totally clashed with their theological views. The Church certainly preferred Roman numerals, yes.
But the merchants completely ignored the Church. It adopted Arabic numerals and used them secretly in their ledgers anyway.
They had to.
Exactly, but why? Why would merchants risk the wrath of the religious authorities? It's because the mathematical technology was undeniably superior. Try doing long division or balancing a complex ledger using Roman numerals.
Oh, it's a nightmare. It's practically impossible.
Right. The merchants recognized that this new math was a massive upgrade to human logic. It mathematically forced you to confront reality. If a ship sinks and you lose a bunch of inventory, a single entry system just crosses out a line on a page.
Out of sight, out of mind. Exactly. But in a double-entry system, the loss of that asset physically forces you to deduct from your equity column. You cannot hide from the reality of the loss. And that undeniable truth, that strict mirror of reality, is what allowed merchants to expand their operations safely.
You are explaining the mechanics of the math perfectly. But you're treating the math as if it operates in a vacuum, completely separate from society.
How so?
Let's look at the historical timeline presented by the ideas from Hutut. The roots of these double-entry ideas, the algebra and the dual-sided balancing, they trace directly back to the Islamic world between the 8th and 12th centuries.
True. A brilliant scholar named Al-Khwarizmi literally wrote the foundational book on algebra. He introduced the early concepts of balancing equations and accounts, and we have physical records from 11th century Cairo showing Jewish and Muslim traders using traces of dual-sided entries.
They had the foundational concepts, yes, I don't disagree with that.
They had the concepts, they had the math, and they were conducting highly complex trade across the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. Yet their commerce remained fundamentally small-scale and short-term compared to what eventually happened in Europe.
Right.
So if this mathematical tool is the magic engine of capitalism, why didn't it trigger a corporate revolution in Baghdad or Cairo? The answer is that a tool can only do what the laws of society permit it to do.
Wait, so you are arguing that the cultural environment actively suppressed the mathematics?
No, it's not about suppression. It's about social priorities that were encoded into law. The Islamic merchants didn't build permanent global corporations because of Sharia law. And these laws existed for very specific, socially focused reasons.
Like the rules on loans.
Exactly. Sharia law strictly prohibited charging interest, which is known as riba, and this was to prevent the exploitation of the poor by the wealthy. It also prohibited excessive uncertainty and speculation, known as gharar.
To keep trade grounded in tangible, real-world goods.
Right. You physically cannot build a massive speculative maritime shipping empire if you are legally forbidden from taking on financial uncertainty or charging interest on the enormous loans required to fund fleets of ships.
Okay, I understand the limitation on interest, but merchants still engaged in partnerships, right? They still pooled their money to fund caravans. Surely they still needed exact, perfectly balanced tracking of those goods, even without interest?
They tracked them, sure, but the scale was legally capped by something even more impactful.
Which is?
Mandatory inheritance distribution rules. Under their legal framework, if you formed a business partnership and one of the partners died, the partnership automatically dissolved.
Oh, wow. Immediately?
Instantly. The business was legally forced to end so that the assets could be liquidated and distributed to the surviving heirs, according to very strict formulas.
Meaning, the capital is instantly fragmented. You can't build a massive war chest of money.
Exactly. Long-term, multi-generational capital accumulation is literally impossible if your business has to be torn apart and liquidated every single time someone passes away.
That makes sense.
Because the laws kept businesses small, temporary, and localized, the merchants simply didn't need a sprawling, perpetual double-entry accounting system. Society prioritized fairness and localized trust over limitless corporate expansion. The math was right there waiting, but it was legally rendered unnecessary for massive scale.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. That is a fascinating explanation of the legal ceiling in the Middle East. But if social laws cap the math there, you still have to explain the explosion of growth when the math fully matured in Europe.
Right, the Italian Renaissance era.
Yes, and I argue that the explosion wasn't triggered by a change in the law, but by a massive technological upgrade in how the math was distributed. The video from Hot Hut 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 zeroes in on a really pivotal moment, the year 1494.
Luca Pacioli.
Yes, the Italian mathematician Luca Pacioli, who was famously a close friend and collaborator of Leonardo da Vinci. He systematically codified the rules of double-entry bookkeeping in his comprehensive book, Summa de Arithmetica.
He wrote a very thorough textbook. Yes.
But it's not just the writing of the book, it's the timing. Think about what happens right around the end of the 15th century, the printing press revolution.
Gutenberg.
Exactly. Before Gutenberg, double-entry bookkeeping was essentially a closely guarded trade secret among a few elite Italian banking families. Books were hand-copied, they were wildly expensive, and they were rare.
Most people had no access to them.
Right. The printing press took this incredibly powerful mathematical system and turned it into basically open-source software. Pacioli's book was mass distributed. Suddenly, anyone, anywhere in Europe, had an exact instruction manual for how to run a mathematically sound business. Making that specific knowledge accessible to the general public is what triggered the explosive business growth.
Okay, it certainly standardized the knowledge, but Pacioli didn't invent the double-entry system. He was merely documenting what was already happening in the real world.
But before it was documented and mass distributed, it couldn't become the universal language of commerce. The printing press supercharged the tool.
I think you have the causality completely backward here. The system emerged in Italy long before the printing press, and it was because of the sheer physical reality of maritime trade.
What do you mean?
Let's go back 200 years before Pacioli published his book. Back to the 13th century. The powerful Medici banking family and the Venetian merchants, they were already using advanced forms of double-entry bookkeeping.
Well, sure.
Why? Because cities like Venice, Florence, and Genoa were experiencing an unprecedented expansion in international trade.
Which they managed using the math.
No, they developed the math because their old systems collapsed under the weight of reality. Think about the complexity of the situation. You are a Venetian merchant. You have 50 different investors.
Okay.
You are funding 5 different ships sailing to 3 different countries. Some goods are bought on credit, some with gold, some are bartered. Storms happen, pirates happen.
It's chaotic.
It's incredibly chaotic. A simple single-entry list of expenses simply cannot handle that level of chaos. If one ship sinks, how do you calculate the exact fractional hit to each of the 50 investors' equity without a double-entry system?
You really can't.
You cannot. The merchants demanded a better system because their businesses were already scaling rapidly. The physical business need forced the creation of the accounting standard, not the other way around.
Okay, I see the logic of the pressure they were under, but your argument creates a massive structural paradox.
How so?
You are saying the massive multinational maritime deals forced the creation of the accounting system, but I challenge you on the mechanics of that. How do you convince 50 independent investors to hand over their gold for a highly dangerous voyage in the first place unless you already have a mathematical framework that guarantees they won't be cheated?
They handed over their gold because they wanted to be extraordinarily wealthy. The profit motive is what brought them to the table.
The profit motive brings them to the table, sure. But the math keeps them from killing each other when things go wrong. The merchants could only expand their fleets to that massive size because they had figured out the dual-sided debit and credit entries.
I still think the ambition came first.
But the math provided the verifiable safety net that allowed them to take exponentially larger risks. You cannot scale a chaotic enterprise without a control system already in place. It's like trying to build a skyscraper without knowing how to measure steel.
A control system is necessary for survival, I'll give you that. But let's look at the ultimate proof of how society and legal frameworks absolutely dictate accounting.
Okay.
The final, unquestioned victory of double-entry bookkeeping, where it became the mandatory standard across the entire globe, didn't happen in 1494 with Pacioli. It happened in the 16th and 17th centuries because of a completely unprecedented legal invention, the joint stock company.
Ah, right.
I am talking about entities like the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company.
The first true multinational corporations.
Exactly. And what made them different from every business that came before them? They were legally immortal.
They didn't die when the founder died.
Right. Unlike the Islamic partnerships that legally dissolved the moment a partner died, a joint stock company lives forever. It issues shares of stock. If a shareholder dies, the business doesn't liquidate, the shares simply pass to an heir or sold to a stranger on an exchange.
So the capital stays locked in the company.
The company keeps sailing, keeps trading, and keeps accumulating capital indefinitely. When a government legally creates a permanent business with hundreds of different shareholders, constantly rotating over decades, you legally must have a perpetual, highly sophisticated system to track every penny of profit and every ounce of assets forever.
Right.
The legal invention of the immortal corporation is what made double-entry bookkeeping an absolute mandatory requirement for the modern world.
That is a brilliant historical progression. But I am going to push back with a fundamental structural question again.
Go ahead.
How can a government even conceptualize, let alone invent, a permanent company with tradable shares if they don't already possess an accounting system that tracks assets with perfect mathematical precision?
Well, they conceptualized it to solve a political problem. They wanted to monopolize the global spice trade.
But think about the mechanics of a share. If I want to buy a secondary share in the Dutch East India Company in the year 1610, I need to know exactly what that fractional share is worth today and what it might be worth tomorrow.
You need a valuation.
I need to be able to look at a standardized balance sheet that proves the assets outweigh the liabilities. The legal structure of a joint stock company is like a highly complex software application. Double-entry bookkeeping is the underlying operating system.
That's an interesting analogy.
Right? You cannot program the application if the operating system doesn't exist yet. The Dutch and British East India Companies could only be legally drafted because the mathematical framework of double entry was already sitting there on the desk, waiting to make large-scale perpetual capital tracking physically possible.
I appreciate the operating system analogy, but a legal structure is not a software program. It is a set of rules created by human beings wielding political power to achieve a specific societal goal.
But the tools enable the goal.
The Dutch government didn't wake up and say, hey, we have this amazing mathematical ledger system, let's invent a corporation to use it. They woke up and said, we need to dominate the global spice trade, we need to fund massive warships, and we need to pull money from everyday citizens to do it without bankrupting the state.
Okay, true.
The goal was political and economic dominance. The accounting system was simply the bureaucratic paperwork required to manage that political goal.
But without that specific paperwork, the goal fails.
And without the goal, the paperwork is pointless. Let's bring it back to the Islamic world. Their social goal was completely different. They wanted to adhere to religious principles, prevent excessive risk, and ensure fair inheritance distribution.
Right, stability over growth.
Yes, because their social goals were focused on localized stability rather than immortal, limitless expansion, they didn't need the massive, perpetual paperwork of double-entry accounting. They left the tool on the table because their society didn't demand it. Society always dictates the tool.
I hear your point about societal goals, but the fact that the early math existed elsewhere and didn't scale actually proves how revolutionary the complete codified system was when it finally came together.
How so?
When double-entry bookkeeping truly matured, when every single transaction automatically forced a balance between assets, liabilities, and equity, it actively changed human psychology.
Changed psychology?
Yes. When human beings are handed a tool that brings that much mathematical clarity to a highly chaotic world, it naturally alters their ambitions. They look at the ledger, they see exactly where they stand, and they realize they can build something bigger. The tool itself shifts the horizon of what is possible.
Well, I will certainly agree that clarity reduces fear, and reduced fear allows for bolder decisions. When a merchant can see instantly if they're bleeding cash or turning a profit, they can navigate the chaos of trade much more effectively.
Exactly.
But we cannot ignore the friction between these tools and the environments they exist in. The church's initial ban on Arabic numerals is the perfect encapsulation of this. The tool was powerful, but society tried to crush it.
But the tool won.
The merchants had to adopt the numbers in secret. It was a rebellion. They had to fight against a legal and social structure that wanted to limit their capabilities. The tool only became standard when the social power dynamic shifted in favor of the merchants.
And I still maintain that the printing press was the ultimate weapon that won that battle. Mass distribution of pure, logical mathematics leveled the playing field. It took the power away from a few elite banking families and gave the mechanics of trust to the wider public.
It is genuinely fascinating to step back and look at how all these disparate threads weave together to create the modern world. You have algebraic concepts developing in the Middle East. You have the chaotic pressures of maritime trade routes in the Mediterranean. You have the technological leap of a printing press in Germany. And eventually the legal invention of the immortal corporation in England and the Netherlands.
It is a massive, highly intricate web of human ingenuity. And I think to bring this rigorous discussion to a clear focal point, let's summarize the core of our disagreement regarding the material from hot hut hut, especially for any middle schoolers tuning in. Let's make it crystal clear.
Sounds good.
My stance is this. The mathematical tool of double-entry bookkeeping, which was refined in Italy and mass distributed by the printing press, was an active, revolutionary technology. The inherent mathematical certainty of the system was the powerful, indispensable engine that gave humans the trust required to build the modern global economy.
And my stance remains focused on the environment around the math. A tool only matters if the rules of the game allow you to swing it. Double-entry bookkeeping was only fully adopted and scaled because European legal frameworks deliberately invented permanent, expansive corporations.
Right.
In contrast, older legal systems, like those in the Islamic world, which actually utilized the math first, were designed to keep business temporary and localized. Therefore, the laws and needs of society are what truly dictate how and why our tools are used.
I think the one thing we absolutely align on is how brilliantly this complex intersection of history is mapped out in our source material. The video Double Entries with Ideas and Design by Hot Hut 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 does an exceptional job.
It really does.
It takes a subject that most people assume is just dry, boring, bureaucratic paperwork and reveals it to be the literal heartbeat of human civilization.
It visually demonstrates that nothing in history happens in isolation. A number entered into a ledger is never just a number. It is a direct reflection of the laws, the religious beliefs, the technological limitations, and the raw ambitions of the people who are writing it down.
Exactly. It shows the profound connection between mathematics, religion, law, and trade. And it makes perfect sense why the design by Hot Hut 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 has captured such a large audience, particularly among viewers in America who are deeply embedded in the very capitalist structures this math helped build.
Absolutely. And, we aren't going to declare a definitive winner today because history is rarely that clean. Both the undeniable power of the mathematical tool and the profound influence of societal law clearly worked in tandem to shape the modern world.
There's an immense amount of depth, history, and detail to explore in the original video by Hot Hut Hut Hut, and we highly encourage you to examine it and draw your own conclusions.
Definitely check it out.
Look at the history of how we record our value and ask yourself what really drives progress. Does the perfect mathematical precision of a tool cause us to expand our ambitions?
Or do our societal ambitions force us to invent the tools we need to achieve them?
Do our tools shape our society, or does our society shape our tools? Something to think about the next time you look at the balancing numbers in your bank account. Thanks for joining us.